I really believe that they weren't in the command capsule at launch. They did a little bit of a magician act with the astronauts. They went up the elevator, but they came down the elevator. In other words, they did not want to risk the lives of the astronauts in case the Saturn blew up.
The Apollo 11 vehicle, or Saturn V, was sent out of people's sight, and then it was jettisoned into the South Atlantic, where all of the 6 that were launched now reside. There were no astronauts, of course, on board. They were hidden away carefully to be returned, allegedly, in their command capsule by being dumped out of a C-5A transport plane.
In his suit for damages, which was filed on August 29, 1996, Kaysing had this to say about Lovell's referral to him as being wacky. My need for writing income is great as my wife has Parkinson's disease, which is considered terminal after a long period of incapacity. Her medical bills in 1995 were in excess of $50,000 due to the ailment and a broken hip and shoulder. Therefore, any refusal by a publisher due to being called wacky by a well-known astronaut is and will be damaging to my ability to pay for medical care.
He libeled Bill, so Bill Kaysing promptly filed a case in court. And believe it or not, the judge was bending over backwards. And I signed on to take care of the technical work. Mm-hmm. God, what a case I was preparing. What visuals. and he got a jury trial, too, which I didn't expect they'd ever let him have. Jeez, it was going so swell, that suit.
As part of his charges against Jim Lovell, Kaysing also attached this personal letter which Renee had sent to movie star Tom Hanks during the production of Apollo 13.
What I went through when he was going to make that movie, I love that guy. When I find out he's going to make that movie.
Houston, we have a problem.
We got a wicked shimmy up here.
Houston, we are venting something out into space. It's definitely a gas of some sort.
Like the heart rates are skyrocketing.
The Apollo 13 spacecraft is apparently losing breathing oxygen. The emergency has ruled out any chance of a lunar landing.
I pulled every string I could think of trying to get in touch with him to tell him, don't make that movie. He'll just be propagating bullshit. You know, in the Apollo 13 film from NASA, they're way away from Earth, and they got a whole porthole showing blue sky.
Yeah.
Now, that's impossible. You do not have blue sky shining in your window out in space. It can't be done. But they did it.
Yeah.
I tried so hard because I liked the guy, and I didn't want to see him put himself, in that position. You know that when high-pressure oxygen blows up, it blows up. When that tank busts, it acts as a huge bomb. The fragments fly all over. Half the thing will take off like a rocket ship. Oh no, that flimsy constructed craft only suffered minor damage.
In this letter, Mr. Colbert, Renee pointed out many technical problems, which I am sure Jim Lovell did not tell you on your show. To enlighten you, I am going to read you this letter. NASA claims a tank of oxygen located in the service module exploded halfway to the moon. For some mysterious reason, the crew was unable to isolate the tank, which resulted in the loss of oxygen to the other tanks. This oxygen was destined to be the oxidizer required by the hydrogen fuel in the fuel cells, whose function is to create electricity in the vacuum of space. According to NASA, the air conditioner, the heater, had to be turned off, and the command capsule's temperature dropped, forcing the crew to retreat to the stored LEM. Murray and Cox write this: because the LEM used batteries instead of fuel cells. This means that the LEM could not stand a power drain of magnitude required by air conditioning or electric heaters. They go on to say, bit by bit, the LEM was powered down to 15 amps per hour, approximately 600 watts, and the astronauts, wearing thin clothing designed for a long trip in a confined space at 70 degrees, began to get cold as the temperature dropped below 60 degrees and kept going down. According to NASA, both men and critical equipment became cold, In fact, NASA Control became extremely worried that the internal guidance system would freeze up. In keeping with the old science fiction "space is cold" theme, most of the 12 men who claimed to have landed on the moon complained that the LEM was too cold to sleep in. Harry Hurt writes of the Apollo 11 landing, "Aldrin curled up on the floor of the LEM, only to discover he was too elated and also cold to sleep during the astronaut's scheduled 7-hour rest period before lunar takeoff." It is at this point I would like to point out that Hurt goes on to quote Aldrin, saying, "We could have raised the window shades to let the light warm us, but that would have destroyed any remaining possibility of sleeping." And yet, the propagandists argue that the LEM windows were facing away from the sun. Why would Aldrin be concerned about sunlight coming in through the LEM windows when they were facing away from the sun in the first place? The enigma of space is that heat, not cold, is the problem. To examine these claims, we must first understand that the vacuum of space lacks matter and is composed of nothing. Only matter can become hot. If matter is shaded from the sun, it will eventually radiate away all its heat. However, an object in the sun will do nothing but increase in temperature until the shaded side radiates away as much heat as the sun is absorbing when a balance is reached. This balance point is over 250 degrees Fahrenheit, which is also the temperature of the moon's surface during the lunar day. Since all the moon landings took place during the lunar day, how could these 12 astronauts, not a typo, claim they wandered for hours on the hot surface? Insulation does not stop the flow of heat, it only impedes it. I have taken a frozen hot dog from the freezer and placed it in an oven, setting the temperature for 275 and turned it on. 20 minutes later, I have eaten that roasted hot dog. Try this for yourself. From the first at the start of the space age through the Apollo missions, these craft had to be air-conditioned, chilled, while standing on the launch pad in the Florida sun. Once in the vacuum of space, cooling was achieved by ejecting water and directing the ice crystals formed onto the heat exchanger. This is an identical process whereby a fire extinguisher generates dry ice from liquid carbon dioxide. After launch, any of the ships that stayed in Earth orbit were in the sun about half of each orbit and in the shade of the Earth the other half. Despite the fact that they orbited each hour, they still had to be cooled. The heating power of the sun in space is about 20% stronger than on Earth because of our thick atmosphere, water vapor, dust and clouds. Here is just one example. Written about Aldrin's Gemini 12 spacewalk, we find, while he was working outside on a daylight pass above the world, he could feel the strong heat of sunlight against the rear inner wall of the inflated suit. He almost burnt his skin before he leaned forward again. An external zipper was located in that area, and its metal parts had become intensely hot from absorbing solar radiation. This is reasonable because anyone here on Earth who has ever grabbed a tool left lying in the summer sun has become very close to burning his hand. Wasn't the Apollo 13 ship in the sun the full time because it had no Earth's shadow to hide in? How could it become cold?
And so the astronaut outside his spacecraft has now only one more garment underneath. This one, the liquid cooling garment as it's called. And it answers the problem that they discovered on the Gemini flights related to the fact that once in an extravehicular spacesuit, an astronaut can get extremely hot doing very simple tasks. And it answers the problem that they discovered on the Gemini flights related to the fact that once in an extravehicular spacesuit, an astronaut can get extremely hot doing very simple tasks. Once in an extravehicular spacesuit, an astronaut can get extremely hot doing very simple tasks.
Later, the Skylab, which spent about half its time shielded from the sun by the shadow of the Earth, would seriously overheat when one of the sails, which provided solar power and helped shield the ship from the sun, failed to deploy properly. About 3 hours after the launch, Baker reports, "The environmental control officer was swamped with information he never expected to see. Temperatures were all wrong, fluctuating wildly, but for the most part, going in just one direction, up. About 12 hours into the launch, we find temperature problems would become acute this day.